Catus, Maximus here, this time with a review of the Harbor Freight Icon 3/8 inch torque wrench. I was going to mention it, in Harbor Freight they had like this big table of a bunch of orange label tools, and they were extremely marked down. Apparently, I was talking to the clerk, they refer tools that are deemed not, I guess, a basic quote-unquote customer issue, or I guess sent back to Harbor Freight, and then I guess people who are more familiar with the tools determine, if they're actually broken or what's going on with them. And so this icon was on the shelf, or was on this bin, and it was actually not marked down a lot, but for 75 bucks I figured I'd go for it. The 3/8 inch is actually, I think, quite a bit better value even for their retail price versus the little inch pound one. Even though it's 3/8, these little torque wrenches sometimes are prohibitively expensive, and I think it was more of the kind of the novelty, although I use this a lot on bicycles. It's really handy for that. But that's 100 bucks on the shelf, without a coupon. This is only 10 bucks more, and you get a better case. The case that came with this was just cheesy, plastic hinges, and I mean, it had one metal clasp, but it had plastic hinges on the back. It had this little window, and it didn't have like any overmolding like that, so if you dropped it in the case, the torque wrench would just beat around. So I just recycled that case. The 3/8 inch comes with a much more substantial case, actually too substantial, mainly because it's so wide for just a 3/8 inch torque wrench. It's just excessive bulk, especially when they didn't give you any areas down here for you to put maybe some extensions or sockets. It's just a big dead space case, the easiest way of putting it, even though they did improve it by giving you 2 clasps and actual steel hinge pins. I was noticing on the case, while we're on that subject, there's this little provision here, so you can go ahead and carry it around. Makes it a little bit easier that way. But of course, when you set it down, it's having some problems there, because they didn't include any kind of like little moldings on the bottom so that it would actually stand up on its edge when you do carry it like that. So a little bit of an oversight there. Anyway, let's take a quick listen to its clicking ability, or clicking sound. Here we go at just 20 foot-pounds, 35 foot-pounds, and this is 20 to 100. 50 foot-pounds, about half its range. And I should take that opportunity to mention that I've done a lot of testing. This one's more than, it's actually surprisingly enough better. The paperwork and always says that these are 4% in the forward or on direction. They do on and off on the ratchet head there. I mean, the fit and finish is actually pretty darn nice on this ratchet, but it is different design language. Before I get into that, it is plenty accurate. When you are pulling on these click type torque wrenches, it's really easy to pull, and when it actually the torque value is right where that ball releases, and it's surprising how small the tolerance is from that ball releasing and then the arm hitting its stop point, and you actually putting a little extra torque. And you notice that if you use like a digital torque meter and you measure yourself, you find that when it clicks, you bump the bracket. You're putting so much force to get it to overcome whatever value it is that you end up overshooting. And if you use like 2 hands and a really strong way of bracing yourself and really slowly pull the torque wrench until it just climbs over that hump region, these can actually be within 1% or 2%. I think it's just due to the human nature that they actually have like 4 and 6% tolerance margins. Because many times, especially if they're kept lubed, these things can be quite accurate. 90 tooth anvil, pretty decent, not too bad on the backlash. Anvil play, there's a little bit in there. It's not too bad, but it's not as good as the straight handle Icon ratchets. Laser etched, they did forge Icon into the head there. Fit and finish is great. They do like a consolidated devices style rubber stopper at the end of the handle, and an aluminum handle, which I find a little bit curious because steel's more durable, but maybe they saved a little bit of cost. But I should zoom in just a bit here. How about a whole bunch? There you go. That is an example of knurling that is not done by two wheels that are rolling over the metal and actually crushing it, which is what you want to do with steel because it's a cold working process. This is an example of a CNC knurler that actually cut these knurls, and this is an example of perfect knurling. There, now you have even more zoom. And what perfect knurling is just like this, where the cross hatches one direction are have the same width as the cross hatches in the second direction. And then you can see that each one of these is like a little pyramid with just a tiny little flap. That's like the perfect knurling. So anyway, the wrench really isn't too bad. The case is, even though it's stronger, is just really a lot of bulk. I'm sure a lot of people will like it. It will protect the wrench pretty well, but it could be designed just a little bit better. As far as the quality of the detent, it's pretty good. I would say that it's standard. It's nothing. It's not too weak, but it's certainly not what you consider to be like a really strong one either. But it's more than fine enough. And if we look at the little details, like how well the center stamping is, it's pretty well centered. It's not offset or anything like that. But some of the other things that are curious, you'd think both of these wrenches were made by the same company, but you can see that they have a different neck style. You can see the switch on this one has a little flange, is like really flush. This one is like made to kind of look like that, but it doesn't have the flange. It sticks out real far. It's really like kind of square and bulbish. So it's interesting that there's such differences in, once again, in the design. So let's take a quick look at the ratchet mechanism. Okay, that took a little bit of work, surprisingly enough. They did Loctite both the screws. They're decently long, and I should say some of these ratchets use screws that just have terrible manufacturing quality, and like almost any driver you use just doesn't ever really fit right, but I have to say that these are at least decent quality screws. And see if we can't. So we'll have to do it this way. And yeah, the design, like, oh, it's significantly different, huh? This is a totally different ratchet mechanism. So the ratchet mechanism inside this icon is a 90 tooth, but it's a floating pawl design. Yeah, I had to show this. So what's interesting is just for the price, you're getting a much bigger torque wrench, but you can see what's going on here. It's strange. The ratchet mechanism is actually much cheaper in the 20 to 100 foot-pound or the mid-size range. They're using, over here, they're using what's known as a bat wing. I call it a Williams style because this is a style ratchet mechanism that's been around for probably 100 years or something. It's been around for a very long time, but they're using it in a 92 situation. And this type of mechanism is very good when you have a coarse tooth because there's just a lot of steel to engage, and because the forces will be offset to a different portion of the ratchet, and they never have issues like locking up or seizing. The problem is when you get into fine teeth, you're just not working with much cross section. It's just, you can see these. There's 1, 2, 3. It looks like there's 5 or 6 teeth there, and it'll be fine in a torque wrench that only goes to 100 foot-pounds. But what's interesting is on the quarter inch, same 90 tooth, they're using what's more of a standard or a modern design, which is a floating pawl. And that's what this pawl does. And when you do the reverse switch, it just moves it over to the other side. And when it grabs, there's just a spring that pushes on it. And it ends up wedging itself in this little curved area. And if they don't quite get them right, they can have issues jamming up, etc. But the big deal about the floating pawl is you can have one giant ratchet mechanism, or I should say very wide. So when you get to these super fine teeth, you're compensating for the lack of cross-section this way by increasing the cross-section this way. And that's how you do it, and it's interesting. And they do have like a little O-ring seal on the quarter inch. With this, whoop, I almost dumped out not many parts. So this is, craftsmen would use this because the switch just has a little, there's also like a little square in the back of the pawl, and see the switch kind of rattles around. So craftsman's, I-beam ratchets were like that. So what do? I think the torque wrench is okay. I think it's actually worth about $75. See this presents a conundrum, and I've been noticing that's really the easiest way to say it about the icon tools is a lot of times they're like upgrades of other Harbor Freight tools, but you still don't know what you're getting, because sometimes, like, some of their tools are terrible and sometimes they're pretty good, and you might get this little torque wrench and say, well, the fasteners are what really suck on this little one, but otherwise it has an O-ring seal and a pretty decent ratchet mechanism. And then you say, okay, I'm going to get the 3/8 one, and even though I got this on sale, somebody who might just be getting it at a normal price is getting one where they might think, the fasteners are a little better, but it turns out that, the ratchet mechanism is actually a little bit cheaper. And so even though it's like a decent quality click type torque wrench, for an Icon brand, you're not sure exactly. Once again, you're just not, there just isn't consistency there, especially when you're getting two of the, series of a tool and one just looks totally different than the other one. You don't know exactly what's going on. Anyway, let me zoom back out on this. I should say this thing is pretty heavy and dense. And it does adjust well. I will give it that. I haven't mentioned that yet either. I don't know if it is ball bearing, but it kind of feels like it is. It certainly is pretty smooth. We'll see how it breaks in over time. So that'll be it for the review. I mean, this will be more than fine of a torque wrench, but it, isn't a brother to this one. It more is just shares some of its DNA, which is meaning they're micrometer adjustable click type wrenches, but it just almost feels like this is a different supplier or something. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out. Oh, and I really do appreciate all the comments.